Our scripture reading this morning comes from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 13, verses 45 through 46. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant in search of fine pearls. When he found one very precious pearl, he went and sold all that he owned and bought it. The Gospel of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Will you pray with me? May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, for you are our strength and our Redeemer. Amen.
Amen.
Before I begin the sermon, I want to address our current public health situation. We're all experiencing a disruption of our normal routine these days. The president has declared a national state of emergency, and most public gatherings are suspended, including classes and sporting events, concerts, and even public worship here at Trinity. For some of us, the need to distance ourselves from social gatherings is quite strange and unsettling. I have a friend who woke up yesterday at 3 a.m. with a panic attack. For others, this temporary disruption is a chance to slow down and to take stock of what we actually need. We don't know how long this situation will last, but I hope that we can adapt and find ways of connecting with each other. We need a welcoming community of compassion and faith now more than ever. But what that looks like may need to change at this time. As one adaptation, the Trinity staff will be recording parts of the worship service that we would have experienced together if we had public worship. And I know that this electronic format is far from ideal. For one, I'm not able to look you in the eye, or I can't even tell if you're laughing at my jokes. But I believe that our faith in God can help us through this very difficult time, which is why we're continuing our series on the parables. It's inspired by Amy Jill Levine's work, Short Stories by Jesus. It's a series that is helping us examine what is important, but through the lens of Jesus' parables, like the mustard seed, the lost and found, and the widow and the judge. The parable for today is about a precious pearl, and it reminds me of a woman who says to her husband one morning, "Dear, I hope you remember what day it is today." Well, later at work, he confesses to a coworker, "I think I might have forgotten that today's my wife's birthday." The coworker says, "Oh, just, buy her a new dress and a pearl necklace. Everything will be fine." So he does so after work, and he races home and showers his wife with these gifts. And she's thrilled. "Darling, I love it. What a beautiful outfit to wear when we pick up my mother from the airport today." The parable that Jesus tells us is also about buying pearls. But I think my joke was actually longer than Jesus' parable today. Some parables, like the lost son, have multiple characters and a complex storyline. But other parables, like the pearl of great price, are very short and simple. This one's just 2 verses. The kingdom of heaven is like a merchant in search of fine pearls. When he found one very precious pearl, he went and sold all that he owned and bought it. This parable involves one man and his quest for beautiful pearls. He ends his search after finding just one very precious pearl. He sells all his possessions to own that one item. As with other parables, Amy Jill Levine encourages us not to assume that the parable is an allegory. She argues that even the brevity of this parable raises significant issues about surprise, identity, and ultimate concern. Jesus begins with the protagonist. Now, in most English translations, he is simply identified as a merchant, but actually, in the original Greek, Jesus uses two words to describe this one. First, he is a person, anthropos, and second, he is a merchant, emporos. The fact that Jesus refers to this individual first as a person signals to us that this story could be about anyone, including you and me. In the parable, the person also happens to be a merchant, and this dual identification suggests that our protagonist is a man, but he may not always be a merchant. Levine says that merchants are socially acceptable. On the social ladder, they may be perhaps a step up from salespeople and 2 steps up from peddlers. He's the type of independent shopkeeper who might be a member of today's Chamber of Commerce. This man, a merchant, is looking for fine pearls. Now, the value of a pearl, according to one source, is based on its type, size, surface quality, and other factors. For example, wild pearls are far more valuable than cultured pearls. In today's market, the price of a single pearl is between $300 and $1,500. But in the ancient world, pearls were much more valuable, even more valuable than rubies. Most people in the Roman Empire would never even have seen a pearl, maybe in artwork. Mollusks, such as oysters and clams, naturally produce pearls, and such pearls are very rare. By the way, why did the oyster refuse to give up his pearl? Because he was a little shellfish. Levine notes that shellfish are not culture, but pearls would not have been forbidden from observant Jews. Jesus doesn't specify if our protagonist is a Jew or a Gentile. He merely says that the man searching for pearls suddenly stops looking, not because he finds exactly what he's looking for. Remember, he's looking for a collection of pearls. But rather, he stops after he discovers a solitary pearl of magnificent quality. The man liquidates all his possessions to buy a single pearl. And it is a major disruption in his way of life, selling everything he has, even more than the social distancing that we're going through. But he believes that it is worth it. Levine compares the man to Jesus' disciples. They give up all they have to follow Jesus. However, this man isn't making a sacrifice. He's buying and selling to make an investment. Whereas the disciples, they give their money to the poor or to give up a past way of life. This man sells all he has to purchase a valuable pearl. Now, some people claim that this man is acting in a serious and reasonable way, and that because he, as a merchant, is uniquely sensitive to the value of this pearl, he wisely invests all he has to purchase it. Now, maybe he's wise, maybe he's reasonable when it comes to getting what he wants. But Levine questions if it really is reasonable to sell everything you own to obtain just one small item. This week I asked, for what or for whom would you do everything it takes to secure? One man told me about the cost of securing his daughter's education. He said it involved tutoring from both parents during middle school, and then borrowing against their house for private college. He also helped his wife secure her degree by taking on all the household duties. The intensity of her program meant that they didn't get to see each other as often as they might like. He is continuing to support her professional work by providing some very essential administrative services that would otherwise be very costly. Another person told me about what she was willing to do to get something important to her. She said, "I hate to admit it, but I would do anything for my husband when we were dating." She clarified that anything, at least at that time, meant that she was praying. She described another time when she prayed for God's help, and she made a bargain with God. "If you help me in this situation, God, then I will start going back to church." She said God answered her prayer, and she held up her end of the bargain. It just took her a few years. Sometimes the benefit of going after something with everything that you have isn't actually the thing you're getting, but what you become in the process of getting it. Levine points out that the man gains a pearl with enormous value, but as she says, in the gaining he has not only fulfilled a desire he didn't know he had, but he's also changed his identity. He had been looking for fine pearls, but he buys only one. By finding that pearl of ultimate worth, the merchant stops being a merchant. Thus he redefines himself, and we have to see him anew as well. I think to most people this merchant seems pretty reckless. On the other hand, we see him adopt alternative standards that are not defined by society. Something else is guiding him, whether it's an inner drive or personal yearning or a heavenly prompt. And this changes his life. He's no longer a merchant, but he is still a man, a person. The love of God can do that to us as well. It can strip away the external ways we measure our importance or our worth. And it helps us to see ourselves as God sees us. I think it's important to remember in our capitalist society that we are more than the value of our investment portfolio, whether the stock market is soaring or sliding. And we are more than the balance sheet of what we buy and sell, even when the stores are running out of toilet paper and cough medicine and hand sanitizer. We are God's beloved people of inestimable worth, now and always. Amy Jill Levine teaches at Vanderbilt Divinity School, and one day she asked her class, "What is your pearl of supreme value?" In other words, for what would you sell everything you own? One of her students had been married to a pastor. They had children, and she played the role of a pastor's wife. But when she attempted to continue her own education with a PhD, her husband discouraged her. He had his doctorate and felt that one doctor in the house was enough. But she persevered. She applied to Vanderbilt and was accepted with a scholarship. Upon going back to school, her marriage ended, not surprisingly. And she told the class, "I never expected to find myself here. But when the graduate school offer came, I did what I needed to do to accept it. I gave up my home and my status as a pastor's wife. I took out loans. I took back my original name. I don't know what will happen at the end of this program, but that does not matter. I'm doing what is right for me. I have my pearl." Like the merchant, the woman redefined herself. She was willing to step aside from everything she had to obtain what she wanted. The pearl of great price reminds us that there may be something out there beyond our imagination that demands our recognition of its ultimate value. For his part, the merchant defines treasure on his own terms. He can see what for him has real value, and he does what he needs to get it. This parable is about surprise, identity, and ultimate concern. It could be about anyone, including you and me. The question for us, especially in this anxious time, is, what is your pearl? What is your ultimate concern? And what are you willing to do for it? If your answer in any way involves following Jesus, then it is likely to transform your life in surprising ways.